Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Soldier's Home. Warren Singh moved through the Afghan compound like death itself, his suppressed M4 speaking in whispers as he eliminated the remaining hostiles. The mission had taken 18 hours longer than planned, but the high-value target was neutralized and the intelligence recovered. At 34, Warren was one of the Army's most decorated Delta Force operators, a man who'd spent the last 15 years perfecting the art of violence in service of his country. Reaper 6, this is command, crackled through his earpiece. Mission complete. RTB immediately. Warren acknowledged and began his extraction, his mind already shifting to thoughts of home. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. His wife Tracy and their 12-year-old son Jonathan. 3 weeks in the Hindu Kush had felt like 3 months, and the mission's early completion meant he could surprise his family. The flight back to Bragg gave Warren time to reflect on the life he'd built outside the shadows. Tracy Frazier had been a military brat herself, the daughter of a career Marine who understood the demands of special operations. When they'd married 8 years ago, she'd seemed like the perfect military wife, strong, independent, and capable of handling the long deployments that came with Warren's classified work. Jonathan was the light of Warren's life, a brilliant kid who devoured military history books and had already expressed interest in following his father's path. During their camping trips to the Blue Ridge Mountains, Warren had begun teaching him basic fieldcraft. Not because he wanted his son to become a soldier, but because he believed every man should understand how to protect what mattered most. "You see everything, Dad," Jonathan had said during their last trip, 6 months ago, "like you've got special eyes or something." Warren had smiled at that. Special eyes indeed. The kind that came from years of hunting the world's most dangerous predators in places that didn't officially exist. The C-130 touchdown at Pope Army Airfield just after midnight. Warren's gear was minimal, a single black duffel containing his personal weapons and equipment that never saw the inside of an official inventory. The truck ride to his off-base house in Fayetteville should have been routine, a quiet transition from operator back to husband and father. But as Warren approached his neighborhood, his tactical instinct began sending warnings. A black Tahoe with government plates sat 3 houses down from his own, unusual for their civilian street. Light glowed from his bedroom window at 0130 hours, when Tracy should have been asleep. Warren parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through shadows with the fluid grace of a predator. His house sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees that provided excellent concealment. What he saw through the kitchen window made his blood turn cold. Tracy stood at the counter, her back to the window, talking animatedly to someone Warren couldn't see. But her body language was wrong. Animated, excited, sexual. This wasn't the posture of a woman talking to a female friend or family member. Warren circled to the backyard, using skills honed in dozens of countries to remain invisible. Through the sliding glass door, he could see into the living room where a uniformed soldier sat on his couch, drinking from Warren's beer. The uniform belonged to Sergeant First Class Tyler Carroll, Warren's former teammate from 3rd Special Forces Group. Carroll had been drummed out of Special Forces 2 years ago for conduct unbecoming, a euphemism that covered everything from insubordination to assault. The last Warren had heard, Carroll was stationed at Bragg in a conventional unit, his SF tab stripped and his career effectively over. Now he was in Warren's house, drinking Warren's beer, and based on Tracy's body language, doing much more than catching up on old times. Warren's hand moved instinctively to the Sig Sauer P226 holstered under his jacket. 20 years of training screamed at him to breach and clear, to eliminate the threat with extreme prejudice. But something held him back, the need to understand the full scope of the betrayal before acting. Moving like a ghost, Warren accessed his house through the basement workshop, a space he'd soundproofed for his weapons maintenance work. The house's original blueprints, modified by Warren himself, included several features that wouldn't appear on any official records: hidden passages, surveillance equipment, and secure storage areas that even Tracy didn't know about. From his concealed observation post behind the basement's false wall, Warren could monitor the entire house through a network of micro cameras he'd installed during the home's construction. What he saw on the feeds made him question everything he'd believed about his life. Tracy and Carol weren't just having an affair. They were conducting what appeared to be a relationship of several months' duration. Their comfort level, their casual intimacy, their knowledge of each other's habits all pointed to something far more serious than a momentary indiscretion. But it was the conversation Warren overheard that transformed his confusion into murderous rage. "When does the deployment money hit the account?" Carol asked, his feet propped up on Warren's coffee table. "Next week," Tracy replied from the kitchen. $60,000 for the Afghanistan rotation, plus his hazard pay and special operations bonus. Should be enough to get us started in Colorado. And the kid? Jonathan's old enough to understand that his father's work makes him a target. Military boarding school will be safer for him. The Citadel has an excellent program. Warren's blood turned to ice. They weren't just stealing his money. They were planning to ship his son away to boarding school while they started a new life together. "What about when Warren comes back?" Carol pressed. Tracy's laugh was cold and calculating. "He won't be coming back, Tyler. I've been documenting his erratic behavior for months. PTSD, violent outbursts, paranoid episodes. When he has his inevitable breakdown, he'll be committed for psychiatric evaluation. Military mental health facilities have such tragic suicide rates." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Tracy had been building a case against Warren's mental health, planning to have him declared unfit and committed to a psychiatric facility where he could be eliminated quietly. Carol's dismissal from Special Forces likely hadn't been for conduct issues. It had been orchestrated to position him at Bragg, where he could access Warren's records and monitor his deployment schedule. Warren forced himself to remain calm, to think tactically rather than emotionally. His training had prepared him for betrayal by enemies, but not by the people he'd sworn to protect. The woman sleeping in his bed had been planning his murder, and his former brother-in-arms was helping her do it. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated the man they were trying to destroy. Warren Singh hadn't survived 15 years of special operations by being reckless or emotional. He'd survived by being smarter, more patient, and infinitely more dangerous than his enemies realized. As he watched Tracy and Carol through his hidden cameras, Warren began planning their destruction with the same methodical precision he'd used to eliminate high-value targets across 3 continents. They wanted to play games with a Delta Force operator. They were about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. Chapter 2. The Network of Lies. Over the next 72 hours, Warren conducted the most important reconnaissance mission of his career, mapping the full extent of the conspiracy against him without alerting his targets. His advantage was significant. Tracy and Carol believed he was still deployed for another week, giving Warren operational freedom they couldn't anticipate. More crucially, they had no idea that their target possessed skills and resources far beyond what they'd accounted for. Warren's basement workshop wasn't just a hobby space. It was a fully equipped intelligence center that would have impressed CIA analysts. Years of overseas operations had taught him the value of maintaining personal OPSEC, even at home. The hidden cameras throughout the house were military-grade equipment, capable of audio-video recording with facial recognition software that automatically tagged and cataloged subjects. The first phase of Warren's investigation focused on understanding the timeline and scope of the betrayal. Using his surveillance system's archive function, he began reviewing months of recorded conversations and activities. What he discovered was worse than he'd imagined. Tracy's affair with Carol had begun 14 months ago, shortly after Warren's deployment to Syria. But their relationship wasn't born of simple attraction or loneliness. It was a calculated partnership between 2 sociopaths who'd identified Warren as their path to financial security. Carol's separation from Special Forces hadn't been for conduct issues. According to classified documents Warren accessed through his security clearance, Carol had been under investigation for selling operational intelligence to private military contractors. Before the investigation could be completed, Carol had quietly transferred to a conventional unit at Bragg, where his access to sensitive information was limited but not eliminated. The transfer had been orchestrated by someone with significant influence, someone who wanted Carol positioned near Warren for reasons that were now becoming clear. Tracy's transformation was even more disturbing. The woman Warren had married had been carefully constructed persona, designed to appeal to a special operations soldier seeking stability. Her background as a military brat was partially fabricated. Her father had been a career Marine, but he'd also been court-martialed for embezzlement and died in federal prison when Tracy was 16. More damning was Tracy's financial history. She'd accumulated significant debt through gambling and high-end shopping, debts that had been quietly paid off by deposits from untraceable accounts. Someone had been funding her lifestyle while she played the role of devoted military wife. But the most chilling discovery came when Warren accessed Tracy's laptop, a device she'd left unsecured in his own house, believing herself completely safe from discovery. Her browser history revealed months of research into military life insurance policies, veterans' benefits, and a legal process for declaring service members mentally incompetent. She'd downloaded forms for initiating psychiatric evaluations and had been in contact with lawyers specializing in military divorces. More disturbingly, she'd been communicating with someone identified only as the colonel through encrypted messaging apps. The conversations Warren could access were fragments, but they painted a picture of a larger operation. Warren's deployment extends 2 more weeks. Plenty of time to establish the mental health documentation. Carol confirms the asset transfer protocols are in place. Once the commitment order is signed, we'll have full access. The boys' placement at Citadel is confirmed. Tuition and boarding prepaid through graduation. Phase 3 approval received. Proceed with medical intervention upon target's return. Warren stared at the messages with the cold fury of a man who'd just discovered he'd been marked for death by the people he'd trusted most. Medical intervention was clearly a euphemism for murder, designed to look like suicide or psychiatric breakdown. But who was the colonel? And how extensive was this conspiracy? The answer came when Warren decided to conduct physical surveillance on Carol's apartment. Using skills developed hunting terrorists in urban environments, Warren positioned himself in an abandoned building that provided perfect overwatch of Carol's complex. At 2,100 hours, a black sedan with government plates arrived at Carol's building. The man who emerged was someone Warren recognized immediately. Colonel Edmund Franklin, Warren's former commanding officer in 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Franklin had been Warren's mentor, the man who'd recruited him for the most classified operations, who'd stood beside him at commendation ceremonies and promised him a path to command. Franklin knew every detail of Warren's financial situation, his family relationships, and his psychological profile. Now he was climbing the stairs to Tyler Carroll's apartment like he owned the place. Warren's mind raced through the implications. Franklin had access to Warren's deployment schedules, his mission assignments, and his personal records. If Franklin was involved, this conspiracy extended far beyond a cheating wife and a disgraced soldier. It reached into the highest levels of Special Operations Command. But why? Warren had served with distinction, had never shown signs of instability or disloyalty. What made him a target worth this level of elaborate planning? The answer came in fragments over the next day as Warren continued his surveillance. Franklin's visits to Carol became regular, and their conversations, captured through Warren's directional microphones, revealed the true scope of the operation. Singh's accumulated too much operational knowledge, Franklin explained during one recorded conversation. 15 years of black operations, exposure to classified programs that officially don't exist. The Pentagon's new security protocols require retirement of legacy assets with excessive exposure. Warren felt the world shift beneath him. He wasn't being targeted for money or personal revenge. He was being eliminated as part of a security purge. Special operations soldiers who'd been involved in the most classified programs were being systematically removed, their deaths or commitments disguised as personal tragedies or mental health crises. Tracy and Carol were just the instruments. Franklin was implementing policy from somewhere much higher in the chain of command. How many others? Carol asked. 12 so far. Singh makes 13. After him, We moved to the Navy assets, 3 SEALs with similar exposure levels. Warren's hands clenched into fists. 12 of his brothers in arms had already been murdered, their deaths disguised as suicides, accidents, or psychiatric breakdowns. And somewhere in Washington, bureaucrats had decided that the men who'd bled for their country knew too much to be allowed to live. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, but it also presented opportunities. Warren wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was fighting to expose a conspiracy that reached into the Pentagon itself. But first, he had to deal with the immediate threats to his family. As Warren watched Franklin leave Carol's apartment and drive away into the night, he began planning the next phase of his operation. Tracy and Carol thought they were hunters, but they just revealed themselves to be prey. And Warren Singh had spent 15 years perfecting the art of hunting the most dangerous predators on Earth. The war for his family was about to begin. Chapter 3: The Child in Chains. Warren's original plan had been to maintain surveillance until he fully understood the conspiracy's scope, then execute a surgical strike that would eliminate the immediate threats while preserving evidence of a larger operation. That plan evaporated the moment he witnessed what happened to his son. It was the third night of Warren's covert return, and his surveillance had revealed that Tracy and Carol had established a routine. Tracy would go to her yoga class at 1900 hours, Carol would arrive at 1930, and they'd spend the evening planning Warren's destruction while believing themselves completely secure. But tonight was different. Warren watched through his hidden cameras as Tracy prepared to leave, her movements sharp and agitated. She'd received a phone call earlier that had clearly upset her. Warren's enhanced audio systems had captured fragments about accelerated timelines and unexpected complications. "The colonel says we move to Phase 3 tonight," Tracy told Carol as he arrived. Warren's team leader called asking about his early return status. "Someone's getting suspicious." Carol's face went pale. "Tonight? But we haven't finished the documentation. The psychiatric evaluation isn't scheduled until—" "Plans change," Tracy snapped. "Franklin says the window is closing. We establish the mental health crisis now, or we lose our opportunity entirely." Warren felt ice form in his veins as he realized what they were discussing. They were about to manufacture this psychiatric breakdown that would justify his commitment and eventual elimination. "What about the kid?" Carol asked. Tracy's smile was cruel and calculating. "Jonathan's part of the documentation now. Franklin says we need evidence of Warren's violent tendencies toward family members. A few photos of the boy restrained and frightened should be sufficient to establish a pattern of domestic abuse." Warren's world exploded into white-hot rage. They were planning to terrorize his 12-year-old son to create false evidence against him. The child who trusted him completely, who looked up to him as a hero, was about to become a prop in his mother's murder plot. Every instinct screamed at him to breach immediately, to end this before they could touch Jonathan. But Warren forced himself to think tactically. If he acted now, he'd save his son, but lose the evidence needed to expose the larger conspiracy. 12 other operators had already died because Warren's enemies control the narrative. He needed irrefutable proof of their crimes, and that meant letting them begin their operation while documenting everything. The next hour was the longest of Warren's life. He watched through his cameras as Tracy sent Jonathan to his room early, claiming he needed to catch up on homework. The boy went willingly, trusting his mother completely. He had no idea that Carol was in the house, no warning of what was coming. At 20:45 hours, Carol moved upstairs while Tracy positioned herself in the living room with her phone's camera app ready. Warren's audio pickups captured her practicing her lines. "Help me, please. My husband's having another episode. He's got Jonathan locked in the bedroom." Warren's finger hovered over his phone. 911 partially dialed. He could end this with a single call, but doing so would alert Franklin and his network. They'd scatter, cover their tracks, and the conspiracy would continue with different assets and new targets. Warren needed them to commit to their crime completely, to create evidence so damning that even Franklin's high-level protection couldn't cover it up. At 2100 hours, Carol kicked in Jonathan's bedroom door. Warren watched through the hidden camera he'd installed in his son's room. a security measure he'd implemented after Tracy had started exhibiting strange behavior around Jonathan months earlier. What he saw nearly broke his iron discipline. Carol, wearing his dress uniform to add official weight to the photographs, had zip-tied Jonathan's hands behind his back and forced him to the floor. The boy was crying, terrified and confused, begging to know what he'd done wrong. "Shut up, kid," Carol snarled, placing his boot on Jonathan's chest. "Your mom needs some pictures for your dad. Smile for the camera." Tracy entered the room, her phone recording as she spoke in a voice designed to sound panicked. "Oh, God. Warren, what have you done to him? Please don't hurt our son." The performance was expertly crafted. To anyone reviewing the video later, it would appear that Warren had restrained his own child while Tracy desperately tried to intervene. The timestamp would show the incident occurring during Warren's supposed deployment, establishing a pattern of escalating domestic violence. "Please, Mommy," Jonathan sobbed, not understanding why his mother was filming instead of helping him. "I didn't do anything wrong. Where's Daddy?" "Daddy's not coming home, sweetheart," Tracy said, her voice taking on a tone of mock sympathy that made Warren's blood boil. "Daddy's very sick, and sometimes sick people hurt the ones they love." Carol pressed his boot harder against Jonathan's chest, causing the boy to gasp for air. "We'll send these to Dad," Tracy laughed, her mask slipping completely. "Let him see what happens to little boys whose fathers don't cooperate." That's when Carol spun around, his face suddenly alert. "He's not supposed to be here." Warren had made no sound, left no evidence of his presence, but Carol's paranoia, or perhaps his guilty conscience, had triggered some primitive survival instinct. The former Special Forces soldier began scanning the room, his hand moving toward the sidearm Warren could see holstered under his dress uniform. "What are you talking about?" Tracy demanded. "Something's wrong," Carol insisted. "I can feel it. Someone's watching us." Warren realized that his window for covert surveillance had closed. Carol's combat instincts, however degraded by his corruption, were still functional enough to sense the presence of a lethal threat. In seconds, the situation would escalate beyond Warren's ability to control. Time for the surgical option. Warren moved through his house like death itself, using passages and routes that Carol couldn't possibly know existed. His approach was silent, invisible, and absolutely lethal in its precision. The first they knew of his presence was when Warren's voice cut through the bedroom like a blade forged in hell itself. "Take your hands off my son." Carol spun toward the voice, his hand completing its draw of his service weapon. He was fast, faster than most soldiers Warren had encountered. He wasn't faster than Warren Singh. The former Delta Force operator moved with the fluid grace of 15 years' worth of close-quarters combat experience. His hand intercepted Carol's weapon draw, twisting the soldier's wrist with enough force to snap bone and send the pistol flying across the room. Carol's scream of pain mixed with Jonathan's sobs as Warren drove his knee into the corrupted soldier's solar plexus, dropping him to the floor beside the terrified child. "Jonathan, close your eyes," Warren commanded in the calm voice he'd used to direct his son through emergency drills. "Don't look until Daddy tells you to." Tracy had frozen in shock, her phone still recording the scene that would now document her conspiracy rather than Warren's supposed crimes. Her face was pale with terror as she realized that everything she'd planned had just collapsed into nightmare. "Warren," she began, her voice shaking as she tried to reassemble her mask of innocence. "Thank God you're here. This man broke into our house and—" "Stop," Warren said quietly, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who'd commanded life-and-death situations across multiple continents. "I know everything, Tracy. The affair, the money, the conspiracy. Franklin, the other operators, all of it." Tracy's expression shifted from false innocence to calculating cunning to naked fear as she realized the scope of Warren's knowledge. "You can't prove anything," she said finally, falling back on the legal protections her conspirators had undoubtedly prepared. Warren smiled then, and Tracy took an involuntary step backward. It wasn't the smile of the husband she'd betrayed. It was the expression of a predator who'd just cornered his prey. "I don't need to prove anything in court," Warren said softly, "because you and your friends just signed your death warrant." Carol groaned and attempted to rise, his broken wrist cradled against his chest. Warren's boot connected with his temple, sending him back to unconsciousness with surgical precision. "Jonathan," Warren said gently, "Daddy needs you to go to your bathroom and lock the door. Take your tablet and call your Uncle Henry. Tell him to come get you right now." Henry Pearson, Warren's brother-in-law and a deputy sheriff in Cumberland County, was one of the few people Warren trusted completely. Jonathan knew the drill. Uncle Henry was his emergency contact when Daddy was deployed. As Jonathan stumbled toward his bathroom, still zip-tied but mobile, Warren turned his full attention to the woman who'd planned to murder him and terrorize his child. "We need to talk," he told Tracy, "about your friends, your plans, and how you're going to help me end this." Tracy's defiance crumbled completely as she saw something in Warren's eyes that she'd never noticed before. The cold, implacable gaze of a man who'd killed more people than she could imagine. "I'll tell you whatever you want to know," she whispered. Warren nodded and began cutting the zip ties from his son's wrists with a tactical knife that seemed to appear in his hand like magic. "Yes," he said quietly, "you will." The war for Warren's family had just entered its active phase. Chapter 4. The Interrogation. Warren's basement workshop had been designed for maintaining weapons and equipment, but it served equally well as an interrogation facility. The soundproofing he'd installed to muffle gunfire during weapons testing now contained Tracy's screams as Warren extracted the truth about the conspiracy that had targeted his family. Carroll remained unconscious, zip-tied to a support beam with his broken wrist already swelling to twice its normal size. Warren had deliberately avoided killing him immediately. The disgraced soldier possessed information about Franklin's network that Warren needed to map completely before beginning his elimination campaign. Tracy sat in a metal folding chair, her hands secure behind her back with military-grade restraints. The confident woman who'd planned Warren's murder had dissolved into a trembling shell, her mascara streaking down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. "Let's start with the timeline," Warren said calmly, checking his equipment with the methodical precision of a professional. "When did Franklin first approach you?" I can't," Tracy began, but her words dissolved into sobs as Warren's knife appeared in his peripheral vision. "Look at me," Warren commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "I've spent 15 years extracting information from terrorists who thought they were prepared to die for their cause. Every single one of them eventually told me everything I wanted to know. The only variable was how much pain they experienced before they decided to cooperate." Tracy's eyes widened as she recognized something fundamental about the man she'd married. Warren's capacity for violence had always been theoretical to her, something that happened in foreign countries to foreign enemies. Now, she was discovering that monsters didn't distinguish between foreign and domestic threats when their families were endangered. 2 years ago," she whispered. "Franklin approached me 2 years ago." Warren nodded, filing away the timeline as he prepared his next question. "How?" He said he was conducting a routine security review of operators' families. Background checks to ensure we weren't security risks. It seemed normal. "What changed?" Tracy's composure cracked further. "He showed me photographs of you, in places you'd never told me about, doing things that—" She shuddered. "He said you'd been involved in operations that could never be acknowledged publicly. That if certain information ever became public, it would destabilize entire governments." Warren felt the pieces clicking into place. Franklin hadn't been targeting operators randomly. He'd been eliminating specific assets with exposure to what the intelligence community called zero-footprint operations. Missions so classified that even their existence was compartmentalized beyond normal security protocols. "What did he offer you?" Warren asked. "Money. A new life." He said the government was planning to eliminate operators like you anyway, as part of a security consolidation. That I could either lose everything when you disappeared, or I could cooperate and be compensated for the loss of my husband. The cold calculation in Tracy's admission filled Warren with disgust. She hadn't been coerced or manipulated. She'd been offered payment for her husband's murder and had accepted eagerly. How much? $5 million. Plus Jonathan's education and a new identity in Colorado. Warren absorbed this information without visible emotion, though internally he was calculating the resources required for such an operation. Franklin wasn't working alone. This conspiracy extended to agencies with budgets measured in billions. Tell me about the other families. Tracy's face went ashen. What other families? Warren's knife moved with practiced precision, its point coming to rest against Tracy's throat without quite breaking the skin. Franklin mentioned 12 other operators. You're going to tell me about their families, what happened to them, and who participated in their elimination. I don't know about the others. Tracy sobbed. Franklin only told me what I needed to know for your case. Warren studied her face with the expertise of someone who'd interrogated hundreds of subjects. Fear and desperation were obvious, but he detected no deception in her specific claim about the other operators. Show me the recordings, Henry said finally. Warren played the audio and video files he'd captured over the past 3 days. Henry's face grew progressively more grim as he watched Tracy and Carol discuss Warren's murder with a casual tone of people planning a vacation. When a recording reached the point where Carol terrorized Jonathan while Tracy filmed for false evidence, Henry's professional composure cracked completely. "That's my nephew," he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "They put their hands on my nephew to frame you for child abuse." "Yes," Warren confirmed. "And if we handle this through official channels, Franklin's network will be alerted. They'll destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, and disappear into the bureaucracy. Jonathan will spend the rest of his life as a target, and more operators will die." Henry stared at his restrained sister, seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Tracy had always been ambitious and materialistic, but he'd never imagined her capable of such calculated evil. "What are you asking me to do?" Henry asked. "I'm asking you to trust me to handle this the way it needs to be handled," Warren replied. "Some threats can't be resolved through the justice system, Henry. Some enemies have to be eliminated." Henry understood the implications immediately. Warren wasn't talking about arrests and trials. He was talking about summary execution of everyone involved in the conspiracy. "Warren, I'm a cop. I can't just—" "You're also a Marine," Warren interrupted, "and a father. If someone targeted your kids the way they targeted Jonathan, what would you do? Follow procedures? Or protect your family?" Henry had 2 daughters of his own, 8 and 10 years old. The thought of anyone terrorizing them the way Carol had terrorized Jonathan filled him with murderous fury. But 20 years of law enforcement had also taught him the importance of evidence and due process. "There has to be another way," Henry said. "Federal authorities, internal affairs, someone who can investigate this properly." Warren shook his head. "Franklin's conspiracy reaches into the Pentagon, Henry. The people who authorized this program outrank everyone you could possibly contact. And while you're following proper channels, they'll be eliminating witnesses and covering their tracks." To emphasize his point, Warren played another recording, one he'd captured just hours earlier. Franklin's voice was clear and unmistakable. "Singh's situation requires immediate acceleration. Our contact in the Pentagon says congressional oversight is asking questions about operator mortality rates. We need to close this file tonight." "Jesus," Henry whispered. "They're moving against you right now." "Which means we have hours, not days," Warren confirmed. "Franklin's team will realize something's wrong when Carol misses his next check-in. Once they do, they'll either abort and disappear, or they'll escalate to direct action." Henry's tactical training kicked in as he considered the possibilities. If Franklin's network included active military personnel and federal agents, they had resources that could overwhelm local law enforcement. More importantly, they had the authority to operate with official sanction. "If you're right about the scope of this conspiracy," Henry said slowly, "then Jonathan's not safe anywhere in the country. They'll hunt him down eventually." "Unless we eliminate the threat completely," Warren agreed. "All of it. Franklin, his network, and whoever authorized this program in the first place." Henry stared at Tracy and Carol, his cop's instincts warring with his family loyalty and his Marine training. Everything Warren had told him was supported by overwhelming evidence. The threat to Jonathan was real and immediate. and the official channels Henry trusted had been corrupted by the very people he'd normally turn to for help. "What do you need from me?" Henry asked finally. Warren's expression shifted to one of grim satisfaction. "I need you to arrest Tracy and Carol on charges of child endangerment and conspiracy. That gives us legal justification for holding them while we extract intelligence about Franklin's network. And then we use that intelligence to identify and eliminate every person involved in this conspiracy, starting with Franklin himself." Henry nodded slowly, understanding that he was crossing a line that would fundamentally change his relationship with law enforcement forever. "One condition," he said. "We do this smart. No unnecessary casualties, no collateral damage. We're going after specific targets who've earned what's coming to them." "Agreed," Warren said. "Surgical strikes only. Military precision. And afterward, when it's over," Warren's smile was cold and predatory. "Afterward, we make sure this never happens to another military family. Ever." Henry reached for his handcuffs, making the decision that would transform him from a small-town deputy into an active participant in a shadow war. "Tracy Fraser Singh," he said formally, "you're under arrest for child endangerment, conspiracy, and accessory to attempted murder." As Henry read Tracy her rights, Warren turned his attention to Carol, who'd been listening to the conversation with growing terror. "Tyler," Warren said conversationally, "you're going to tell us everything you know about Franklin's operation. Personnel, safe houses, communication protocols, everything." "And if I don't?" Carol asked, though his voice betrayed his knowledge of the answer. Warren's smile was the expression of a predator who'd already tasted blood. "Then you'll discover what I learned about persuasion techniques during 15 years of hunting terrorists," Warren replied, "starting with some very creative applications of the tools in my workshop." Carol looked around the basement, noting the array of weapons, electronics, and precision instruments Warren had accumulated over his career. "What do you want to know?" he asked quietly. Warren pulled out a digital recorder and set it on the workbench. "Everything," he said simply. From the beginning, the interrogation that followed would provide Warren with the intelligence he needed to plan the systematic destruction of Colonel Franklin's conspiracy. Phase 5 was about to begin. Chapter 6, The Network Unveiled. Over the next 6 hours, Tyler Carroll provided Warren with a complete breakdown of Colonel Franklin's operation, a shadow network that extended far beyond what Warren had initially imagined. The program, codenamed Sunset Protocol, had been authorized at the highest levels of the Pentagon as a response to congressional inquiries about special operations accountability. Too many veterans of classified programs had begun talking to journalists, writing memoirs, or developing drinking problems that loosened their tongues in civilian bars. "It started as a monitoring program," Carroll explained, his broken wrist cradled against his chest as Warren recorded his confession. "Franklin was supposed to identify operators who might become security risks and recommend them for enhanced psychological support." "When did it become a killing program?" Warren asked. "About 18 months ago. Some senators started asking questions about black budget allocations and wanted to interview veterans from specific operations. Franklin's bosses decided the only way to maintain operational security was to eliminate sources of potential leaks." "What about Carroll? How did he get involved?" "Franklin recruited him," Tracy admitted. "Tyler was angry about losing his Special Forces tab. He blamed you and the others for not standing up for him when he was under investigation." "Investigation for what?" "Selling information to private military contractors. But Tyler said it was just consulting work, that everyone did it." Warren felt a surge of cold fury. Carroll had indeed been selling classified information, but instead of accepting responsibility for his betrayal, he blamed his former teammates for not covering for him. When was the plan supposed to be executed? Tonight was supposed to be the psychiatric documentation. Next week, when you returned from deployment, Franklin would arrange for you to have a breakdown during your debrief. Military psychiatrists would commit you to Walter Reed for evaluation, and then you'd have an accident or suicide. Franklin said military psychiatric facilities have high rates of both. Warren stepped back, his mind processing the full scope of their plan. It was sophisticated, multi-layered, and designed to appear completely legitimate to outside observers. A decorated veteran, struggling with PTSD from classified operations, suffers a breakdown and takes his own life in a secure facility. Tragic, but not uncommon. The plan's sophistication implied significant institutional support. This wasn't a rogue colonel acting alone. This was an officially sanctioned program operating under the cover of mental health intervention. A groan from Carol interrupted Warren's analysis. The disgraced soldier was regaining consciousness, his head rolling from side to side as he fought through the concussion Warren had given him. "Good," Warren said quietly. "Now we can get the rest of the story." Carol's eyes focused gradually, taking in his restraints, Tracy's terrified condition, and Warren's calm preparedness. Unlike Tracy, Carol had enough combat experience to recognize the tactical situation immediately. "You're fucked, Singh," he said with the false bravado of a man trying to convince himself he still had options. "Franklin knows I'm here. When I don't report in, he'll send backup." Warren smiled and pulled out his phone, showing Carol the screen. "You mean this report?" He played a brief audio recording in Carol's voice. Phase 3 complete. Documentation acquired. Target will be ready for commitment upon return. Carol's face went white as he realized Warren had used his unconsciousness to record a fake status report in his own voice. "Franklin thinks you're still on schedule," Warren explained, "which means we have until your next check-in to extract everything you know about his operation." "I'm not telling you shit," Carol snarled. Warren's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made both Tracy and Carol recoil instinctively. "Tyler," Warren said conversationally, "in Afghanistan, I once spent 6 days extracting information from a Taliban commander who'd been trained by former Soviet interrogators. He was convinced his ideological commitment would protect him from anything I could do." Warren moved closer to Carol, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "On the 3rd day, he begged me to kill him. On the 5th day, he offered to sell out his own mother for 5 minutes of unconsciousness. On the 6th day, he told me every secret he'd ever kept and thanked me for the privilege." Carol's defiance wavered as he saw something in Warren's face that reminded him why Delta Force operators were considered the most dangerous men on Earth. "The Taliban commander was fighting for something he believed in," Warren continued. "You sold out your brothers for money and spite. I wonder how long your conviction will last." From upstairs came the sound of Warren's front door opening, followed by heavy footsteps and a familiar voice calling out. "Warren?" Jonathan said there was an emergency. Henry Pearson had arrived, just as Warren had planned. "Down here, Henry," Warren called back. "And bring your cuffs. We've got a situation that's going to require official law enforcement involvement." As his brother-in-law's footsteps descended into the basement, Warren turned back to his prisoners with the calm satisfaction of a hunter who'd successfully driven his prey into a perfect killing ground. "Phase 4 begins now," he told them quietly. The real war was about to start. Chapter 5, The Sheriff's Gambit. Henry Pearson descended into Warren's basement, expecting a domestic dispute or perhaps a break-in. What he found was a scene that challenged his 20 years of law enforcement experience. At 38, Henry had served as a Cumberland County Sheriff's deputy since leaving the Marines, and he'd seen everything from domestic violence to meth lab explosions. But nothing had prepared him for discovering his brother-in-law conducting what appeared to be a professional interrogation operation in his own basement. "Jesus Christ, Warren," Henry breathed, taking in Tracy's restraints, Carol's unconscious form, and the array of equipment Warren had arranged with military precision. "What the hell is going on here?" "Henry, I need you to listen very carefully," Warren said, his voice carrying the calm authority Henry remembered from their military days. "What I'm about to tell you will sound insane, but every word is true. And when I'm finished, you're going to have to decide whether you're going to help me save Jonathan's life or whether you're going to follow procedures that will get us all killed." Henry's hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon, then stopped as he saw the expression in Warren's eyes. This wasn't the brother-in-law who'd married his sister 8 years ago. This was the Delta Force operator who'd earned 3 Silver Stars and a Congressional Medal of Honor in places that didn't officially exist. "Start talking," Henry said quietly. Warren explained everything in precise, chronological order. Franklin's conspiracy, the elimination of 12 other operators, Tracy and Carol's role in manufacturing evidence for his psychiatric commitment, and the larger program of systematically murdering special operations veterans who'd been exposed to classified programs. Henry listened without interruption, his cop's instincts evaluating every detail for plausibility and internal consistency. The story was fantastic, but Warren's evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial records, the timeline of Tracy's behavioral changes, it all fit together with the horrible logic of a perfectly planned conspiracy. Warren felt sick as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. The men who'd served their country in the most dangerous assignments, who'd sacrificed their bodies and mind for missions they could never acknowledge publicly, were being systematically murdered by the same government they'd served. How many operators total? Henry asked from his position by the basement stairs, where he was monitoring for unexpected visitors. 15 confirmed dead, Carol admitted. 3 more scheduled for elimination this month. Warren was supposed to be number 16. What about the families? Collateral damage, mostly. Wives who wouldn't cooperate were eliminated along with their husbands. Children were typically placed in foster care or military boarding schools where they could be monitored indefinitely. Warren's hands clenched into fists as he imagined Jonathan growing up in an institution, never knowing that his father had been murdered by his own government. "Give me the personnel list," Warren demanded. "Everyone involved in this program." Carol's confession revealed a network of corrupt military officers, federal agents, and private contractors that had infiltrated multiple agencies. Franklin served as the operational commander, but he reported to a Pentagon official identified only as the deputy, who had authorization from the Secretary of Defense himself. The operational teams consisted of active-duty special operations soldiers who believed they were conducting legitimate security operations, federal agents who thought they were investigating genuine mental health crises, and private contractors who specialized in making murders look like suicides or accidents. The beauty of the system, Carol explained with the detached tone of someone discussing a tactical exercise, is that most participants don't know the real purpose. Everyone thinks they're part of a legitimate program to help struggling veterans. "What about the money?" Henry asked. "Where does $5 million come from for each family payoff?" "Black budget allocations for family support services," Carol replied. Franklin's bosses discovered they could fund the elimination program using congressional appropriations intended to help military families. The irony wasn't lost on them. Warren absorbed this information with growing fury. Not only was his government murdering the soldiers who'd served it most faithfully, but they were using money intended to help military families to fund the operation. "Communication protocols," Warren demanded. "How does Franklin stay in contact with his teams?" Carol described a sophisticated network of encrypted messaging apps, secure phones, and dead-drop locations that allowed the conspiracy to operate with minimal electronic footprint. More importantly, Franklin's teams were compartmentalized. Each cell knew only what it needed to accomplish its specific mission. "That's why you're so valuable," Carol told Warren. "You're one of the few people who's seen the entire operation. Franklin, the financial arrangements, the false documentation, everything. Usually, targets are eliminated before they can piece together the full picture." "What went wrong with my case?" "Your early return from Afghanistan," Carol admitted. "Franklin's intelligence said you wouldn't be back for another week. We were supposed to complete the documentation and have everything in place before you returned." Warren nodded, understanding how his operational security training had inadvertently saved his life. He'd learned long ago to provide false information about his movement schedules, even to trusted sources. "What's Franklin's next move when you miss your check-in?" Carol's face went pale. "Escalation protocol. If an operation is compromised, Franklin activates a direct action team to eliminate all witnesses and destroy all evidence." "Including Jonathan?" "Especially Jonathan. He's seen too much, and he's the only witness who could contradict the official narrative about your mental breakdown." Warren felt ice form in his veins as he realized the scope of the threat to his son. Franklin's network wouldn't just settle for eliminating Warren. They'd murder a 12-year-old boy to protect their conspiracy. Where's Franklin now? Safe house in Alexandria. Former CIA facility that's officially decommissioned but still maintained for special operations. The direct action team stages from there when they need to sanitize a compromised operation. Warren turned to Henry, who'd been taking notes throughout the interrogation. How long do we have? Henry asked. Warren, check his watch. Carol was supposed to check in 4 hours ago. Franklin's already activated his response team. So they're coming here? Probably already on the way, Warren confirmed. Professional killers with federal authorization and military-grade equipment. Henry's face went grim as he realized the implications. His rural sheriff's department wasn't equipped to handle a special operations assault team, and calling for backup would only alert Franklin's network that the conspiracy had been exposed. We need to get Jonathan out of here, Henry said. Agreed. But more than that, we need to take the fight to Franklin before his team can regroup and hunt us down. Warren began gathering equipment from his workshop, weapons, ammunition, communications gear, and electronic devices that would give him tactical advantages in the coming confrontation. Warren, Henry said quietly, if we do this, there's no going back. We'll be fugitives from our own government. We're already fugitives, Warren replied. The moment Franklin marked me for elimination, he made enemies of everyone I care about. The only difference now is that we know we're at war. What about afterwards? Even if we eliminate Franklin's entire network, there will be investigations, congressional hearings, media attention. Warren smiled grimly as he loaded magazines for his assault rifle. Henry, I've spent 15 years conducting operations that officially never happened. Trust me when I say this entire conspiracy is about to become another mission that never took place. Meaning when we're finished, Franklin's network will have simply vanished. No bodies, no evidence, no official acknowledgement that Sunset Protocol ever existed. Just a few Pentagon officials who suddenly decide to retire early and never speak of their service again. Henry stared at his brother-in-law, beginning to understand the scope of Warren's capabilities when he was fully committed to a mission. You're not just talking about killing Franklin, Henry realized. You're talking about erasing this entire program from existence. Exactly, Warren confirmed. Because the only way to protect Jonathan and every other military family is to make sure this never happens again. From upstairs came the sound Warren had been expecting. Vehicles approaching his house at high speed. Contact front, Warren announced calmly, using the battlefield terminology that had kept him alive through dozens of combat operations. Franklin's direct action team had arrived. The final phase of the war for Warren's family was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Siege. Warren's house had been designed with defensive considerations that most suburban homes lacked. His military background had taught him that enemies didn't always attack overseas, and his years in special operations had made him paranoid about home security in the best possible way. The approaching vehicles, 3 black SUVs with government plates, found themselves confronting a structure that had been subtly fortified over 8 years of gradual improvements. Reinforced door frames, bulletproof glass on ground-floor windows, and sightlines that favor defenders over attackers. Henry, get Jonathan and Tracy upstairs to the safe room, Warren commanded as he activated his home defense systems. Carol stays with me. Safe room, Henry asked. Master bedroom closet behind the false wall. Reinforced concrete, independent air supply, communication equipment. Jonathan knows the entry code. Warren had built the safe room after his first deployment to Afghanistan, when he'd realized that his family needed protection even when he wasn't there to provide it. He'd never imagined he'd be using it to protect them from his own government. The exterior floodlights Warren activated revealed 12 men in tactical gear deploying from the SUVs with military precision. Their equipment and movement patterns identified them as Special Operations soldiers, probably from 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, Warren's own former unit. Fuck, Warren muttered, recognizing the bitter irony of facing his own brothers in arms. Franklin's operational security was even more sophisticated than Warren had realized. He was using active-duty Delta Force operators who believed they were conducting a legitimate counterterrorism operation. Warren's encrypted radio crackled to life with a familiar voice. Warren Singh, this is Major Jared Bishop, Delta Force. You are surrounded by federal agents conducting a mental health intervention under authority of the Secretary of Defense. Exit the structure with your hands visible and no one will be harmed. Bishop. Warren recognized the name, a rising star in Delta Force who'd earned his reputation in Iraq and Syria. A good soldier, following orders he believed were legitimate. With no idea, he was participating in a conspiracy to murder his own teammate. Warren keyed his radio. Jared, this is Singh. Check your mission briefing against reality. I'm not having a mental health crisis. I'm being framed for assassination by Colonel Franklin and a network of traitors who've been killing our brothers for 18 months. Negative, Singh. You've taken hostages and made threats against federal agents. This ends now. Warren realized that Franklin's people had briefed Bishop's team with a completely fabricated story. They probably believed Warren had kidnapped his own family and was threatening to harm them unless his imaginary conspiracy claims were investigated. Jared, listen to me, Warren transmitted. How many operators from your old unit have died in the past 2 years? Miller, Jackson, Rodriguez, all listed as suicides or accidents, right? All of them involved in classified operations that officially never happened. There was a long pause before Bishop responded, and Warren could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. That's classified information, Singh, because Franklin's been murdering them systematically, the same way he tried to murder me tonight. Check your casualty reports against the operational history database. Look for patterns. Another pause, longer this time. Warren could imagine Bishop consulting with his team leaders, beginning to question the mission briefing that had brought them here. But Franklin's conditioning had been thorough. When Bishop's voice returned, it carried the flat tone of someone following orders regardless of personal doubts. You have 30 seconds to exit the structure, Singh. After that, we breach. Warren smiled grimly. He'd trained Bishop's generation, had taught them the tactics they were about to use against him. But they'd learned those tactics from textbooks and training exercises. Warren had perfected them in real combat against enemies who fought back with equal skill and desperation. Henry, Warren called upstairs. Are you in position? Safe room secured. Henry's voice came back. Jonathan's terrified, but safe. Good. This is about to get loud. Warren positioned Carroll where Bishop's team could see him through the windows, not as a human shield, but as evidence of the conspiracy they were unwittingly protecting. If Warren could force them to question their mission parameters, he might avoid having to kill soldiers who were following orders they believed were legitimate. The breach came exactly 30 seconds later, executed with textbook precision that Warren had to admire even as he prepared to counter it. Flashbang grenades through the lower windows, simultaneous entry through front and rear doors, and overlapping fields of fire that should have overwhelmed any defender. Should have. Warren had spent 8 years planning for exactly this scenario, and his house had been prepared accordingly. The flashbangs detonated in rooms he'd abandoned, their disorienting effects wasted on empty space. The entry teams found themselves in what appeared to be a normal suburban home, but was actually a carefully designed killing ground. The first soldier through Warren's front door stepped on a pressure plate that activated lights Warren had positioned to blind rather than illuminate. The man's night vision equipment, calibrated for darkness, overloaded instantly, leaving him effectively blind for the crucial seconds Warren needed. Warren's suppressed rifle spoke once, sending a subsonic round through the soldier's body armor with surgical precision. The shot was non-lethal but incapacitating, a technique Warren had perfected for hostage rescue operations where minimizing casualties was paramount. The second soldier through the door reacted with admirable speed, but Warren had already moved to his next firing position using routes through his house that the attacking team couldn't anticipate. Sniper down, the soldier reported. Target has advanced defensive positions. Warren keyed his radio. Jared, you're assaulting a prepared position defended by someone who helped write your training manual. How many of your boys do you want to lose before you start asking real questions about your mission briefing? Stand down, Singh. We don't want to hurt you. Then stop trying to kill me and start investigating the people who sent you here. Warren's next shots were even more precise, disabling 2 more soldiers with wounds that would require medical attention but weren't life-threatening. He could have killed all of them easily, but these men were his brothers in arms, however misguided their current mission. The attacking team withdrew to regroup, carrying their wounded comrades to safety while maintaining perimeter security. Warren used the pause to check on his family and reassess his tactical situation. Henry, status report. We're secure up here. Tracy's crying. Jonathan's asking if you're going to be okay. And I'm trying to figure out how you learned to fight like this. 15 years of practice, Warren replied grimly. How much ammunition do you have? Full loadout. 60 rounds, plus my backup weapon. Good. This isn't over. Warren's radio crackled with Bishop's voice again, but this time the major sounded less certain about his mission. Sing, I've been reviewing our casualty reports. The pattern you mentioned, it's real. Too many good operators dying in circumstances that don't add up. Because Franklin's been eliminating anyone who could expose the programs we've been involved in, Warren confirmed. Check his personnel file, Jared. Look at who authorized this operation and why. Warren could hear heated conversation in the background of Bishop's transmission. Team leaders questioning their orders, consulting with higher authority, trying to reconcile their mission briefing with the evidence Warren had presented. Saying, I need you to surrender and come in for the briefing. If what you're saying is true, we'll investigate it through proper channels. Warren laughed bitterly. Proper channels led to 12 dead operators, Jared. Franklin's network controls the proper channels. The only way this ends is if we eliminate the conspiracy completely. I can't authorize the kind of operation based on unverified allegations. Then you're going to watch more of your brothers die, Warren replied. Starting with the next operator on Franklin's list. Who might be you, depending on what you've seen during your career. That statement hit home. Warren could hear the uncertainty in Bishop's voice when he responded. What are you proposing? Joint operation. Your team, my intelligence, Franklin's network eliminated completely. No official records, no congressional oversight, no media attention. Just justice for the brothers we've already lost. Warren waited while Bishop consulted with his team leaders. These were good soldiers facing an impossible situation, ordered to assault a fellow operator who claimed to be exposing a conspiracy that targeted their own community. When Bishop's voice returned, it carried the resolution of a man who'd made a difficult decision. Sing, we're standing down, but I need proof of your allegations before we can proceed further. Warren smiled for the first time since discovering the conspiracy. Check your secure email, Jared. I'm sending you everything. The siege of Warren's house was over. The hunt for Colonel Franklin was about to begin. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The alliance between Warren Singh and Major Bishop's Delta Force team transformed Warren's suburban basement into a tactical operations center that would have impressed Pentagon planners. Bishop, a compact man with intelligent eyes and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command, studied Warren's evidence with the methodical precision of a professional soldier. His team leaders, Master Sergeant Owen Skinner and Sergeant First Class Maurice Cannon, reviewed financial records, communication intercepts, and personnel files that painted a devastating picture of Franklin's conspiracy. Jesus Christ, Skinner muttered as he scrolled through the list of dead operators. Half these guys served with us in Iraq. I was at Rodriguez's funeral 6 months ago. Listed as suicide, Cannon added grimly. His wife said he'd been acting paranoid, claiming people were watching him. We all figured it was PTSD. Because that's what Franklin wanted you to figure, Warren explained. The beauty of his system is that it uses our own assumptions against us. Special operations soldiers do have higher suicide rates, so when we start dying, everyone assumes it's just the psychological cost of the job. Bishop set down the tablet containing Warren's intelligence files and looked directly at his former instructor. If this is accurate, we're talking about treason at the highest levels of the Pentagon. People with congressional authorization and unlimited resources. Which is why we can't handle this through normal channels, Warren confirmed. Franklin's network has been planning for exposure. They have contingencies, escape routes, and enough official protection to survive any conventional investigation. What are you proposing? Warren activated a wall-mounted display that showed a tactical map of the Alexandria safe house where Carroll had indicated Franklin was stationed. Direct action, simultaneous strikes on Franklin's operational centers, elimination of key personnel, and recovery of evidence that proves the scope of the conspiracy. Henry, who'd been monitoring the conversation from his position guarding the prisoners, looked uncomfortable with the direction the planning was taking. Warren, we're talking about conducting military operations on American soil against American citizens. That's not law enforcement, that's warfare. It's exactly warfare, Warren agreed. Franklin declared war on the special operations community the moment he started murdering operators. We're just finally fighting back. Bishop studied the tactical display with professional interest. The Alexandria facility is a hardened target. Former CIA safe house with multiple escape routes and integrated security systems. A direct assault would require significant planning and resources, which is why we're going to use Franklin's own operational security against him, Warren replied. Carroll's missed check-in means Franklin knows his operation is compromised. He'll activate his contingency protocols, which include moving to a secondary location where he believes he'll be safe from retaliation. Warren manipulated the display to show a second facility, a remote compound in rural Virginia that appeared to be a corporate retreat center. Blackwood Executive Solutions, Warren explained. Franklin's private military contractor, established 2 years ago as a front for Sunset Protocol operations. It's where he'll run to when he realizes his conspiracy is exposed. How do you know that? Cannon asked. Warren smiled grimly. Because I helped design their security protocols when I was consulting for the Pentagon. Franklin doesn't know I was involved in the planning, but I have complete architectural and tactical intelligence on the facility. The irony was bitter but useful. Warren's own expertise had been used to create the sanctuary where Franklin planned to hide from the consequences of his crimes. Timeline, Bishop asked. Franklin will move tonight once he realizes Carroll isn't responding to communication attempts. We need to be in position before he arrives, and we need to ensure no one escapes to continue the program under different leadership. Warren highlighted specific buildings within the Blackwood compound, explaining the defensive positions and escape routes that Franklin's team would rely on during a siege. Primary objective is intelligence recovery, Warren continued. Franklin will have detailed records of all Sunset Protocol operations, including the identities of his Pentagon sponsors. Without that evidence, we can eliminate Franklin, but we can't stop the program. Secondary objectives? Complete elimination of all personnel associated with Sunset Protocol. No survivors, no witnesses, no possibility of the program continuing under new leadership. Henry stepped forward, his expression troubled. Warren, you're talking about murder. Premeditated, organized murder of American citizens. I'm talking about the execution of traitors who've been murdering American soldiers, Warren corrected. These people aren't citizens. They're enemy combatants who happen to carry American passports. Bishop nodded slowly, recognizing the moral framework that Warren was applying. In special operations, the distinction between citizen and enemy was defined by actions rather than nationality. Rules of engagement, Bishop asked. Anyone at Blackwood tonight is part of the conspiracy, Warren replied. Franklin doesn't bring civilians to his operational planning sessions. Everyone in that compound has participated in the murder of American soldiers. What about official authorization? Warren's smile was cold and predatory. Bishop, for 15 years we've conducted operations that officially never happened. Tonight's mission will be another one that never took place. The planning session continued for another hour, with Warren and Bishop's team developing a comprehensive assault plan that would allow them to neutralize Franklin's conspiracy completely. As they worked, Warren felt the familiar calm that came with preparing for combat operations. The uncertainty and moral complexity of the past few days was resolving into the clear, tactical simplicity of a direct action mission. Franklin and his network had made the mistake of targeting Warren's family while believing they could control the narrative of his response. They'd planned for official investigations, legal challenges, and media attention. They hadn't planned for Warren Singh conducting an unauthorized war against their conspiracy with the support of an active-duty Delta Force team. Final equipment check in 30 minutes, Warren announced. We launch at 2,200 hours. As his allies prepared their weapons and reviewed final mission details, Warren took a moment to call upstairs and check on Jonathan. "Hey, buddy," he said gently when his son answered the secure phone in the safe room. "How are you holding up? Are the bad people gone, Daddy?" "The ones who were here are gone. But there are more bad people who want to hurt our family, so Daddy has to go stop them. Will you be okay?" Warren thought about the mission ahead. Assaulting a hardened facility defended by professional killers who had every advantage except surprise and superior motivation. "I'm going to be fine, son, because I have something they don't." "What's that?" "I have you to come home to." And nothing in the world is stronger than a father protecting his family. As Warren ended the call and returned to his final mission preparations, he felt the absolute certainty that had sustained him through 15 years of combat operations. Franklin's conspiracy was about to discover why Warren Singh had never lost a mission, and why he wasn't about to start now. Chapter 9. Blood and Vindication. The Blackwood Executive Solutions compound sat in the Virginia countryside like a corporate fortress, its modern architecture disguising defensive features that would have impressed military engineers. Warren's intelligence had been perfect. As Franklin's convoy of black SUVs approached the facility at 2,145 hours, Warren and Bishop's team were already in position. Warren lay in a sniper's hide overlooking the compound's main entrance, his .300 Winchester Magnum rifle steady on its bipod as he watched Franklin's team deploy. Through his scope, he could see the man who'd orchestrated the murder of 12 operators. A distinguished-looking officer whose silver hair and confident bearing masked the soul of a traitor. "Overwatch has eyes on primary target," Warren transmitted to Bishop's team. "Franklin is in the building." "Copy, Overwatch. Assault teams in position. Waiting for your mark." Warren had divided the mission into phases that would ensure no one escaped. Bishop's Alpha team would assault the main building, while Skinner's Bravo team secured the perimeter and eliminated escape routes. Warren would provide precision fire support and coordinate the overall operation. But Warren had also planned a special role for himself in Franklin's elimination. This wasn't just a tactical operation. It was personal justice for the murder of his brothers and the threatened destruction of his family. "Execute, execute, execute," Warren transmitted. The assault began with Warren's rifle speaking from the darkness, his first shot disabling the compound's main generator and plunging the facility into darkness. Franklin's security team, though professional, had been caught completely off guard by an attack they'd never anticipated. Bishop's team moved like shadows through the compound, their night vision equipment and superior training giving them overwhelming advantages over defenders who'd expected to be conducting a planning session, not fighting for their lives. Warren's second and third shots eliminated sentries who might have raised an alarm, each round placed with surgical precision that ended threats without creating excessive noise. Within minutes, Bishop's team had secured the main building's perimeter and was beginning their room-by-room clearance. Warren monitored their progress through his scope while maintaining overwatch on potential escape routes. "Overwatch, this is Alpha 6. Bishop's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got multiple targets secured. Intelligence haul looks significant." "Copy, Alpha 6. Primary target status. Still hunting. Buildings larger than expected." Warren shifted his position, using his knowledge of the compound's layout to anticipate Franklin's most likely hiding spots. The colonel was too experienced to panic, but he'd also be looking for ways to destroy evidence and escape to safety. "Alpha 6, check the communications center on the second floor," Warren advised. "Franklin will try to contact his Pentagon sponsors before he runs." Warren's prediction proved accurate. Through his scope, he could see lights moving behind second-floor windows as Bishop's team engaged targets in what appeared to be a fierce firefight. Then Warren saw what he'd been waiting for. A figure moving across the compound's rear courtyard, heading for the escape route Warren had anticipated. Colonel Edmund Franklin, moving with the careful precision of a man who'd spent his career avoiding accountability for his actions. Warren's crosshairs settled on Franklin's center mass as the traitor approached a secondary building where a helicopter waited for emergency evacuation. The shot would be simple, 300 meters, minimal wind, stationary target. But Warren wanted more than a clean kill. He wanted Franklin to understand who was destroying his conspiracy and why. Warren's shot took Franklin in the right leg, dropping him to the courtyard's concrete surface but leaving him conscious and aware. The colonel's training kicked in immediately. He began crawling toward cover while calling for backup that would never come. Warren moved from his sniper position with the fluid grace of a predator closing on wounded prey. His approach was silent, invisible, and absolutely lethal in its efficiency. Franklin had reached a maintenance shed when Warren materialized from the darkness like death itself. "Hello, Edmund," Warren said quietly. Franklin spun toward the voice, his sidearm clearing its holster with creditable speed. Warren's hand intercepted the draw with casual efficiency, disarming the colonel and leaving him helpless on the ground. "Warren Singh," Franklin said, his voice steady despite his wound and desperate situation. "I should have known you'd be too clever to die quietly. 12 operators, Edmund. 12 of my brothers, murdered on your orders. 12 security risks," Franklin corrected. "Men who knew too much about operations that could destabilize governments if exposed publicly." Warren's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Franklin recoil instinctively. "And my son? Was Jonathan a security risk too?" Franklin's composure cracked slightly. "Children adapt. Military boarding schools provide excellent education and strict discipline. You have been fine. You terrorized a 12-year-old boy to manufacture evidence against his father. You planned to murder me and leave my son orphaned and alone. I planned to protect American interests from—" Warren's boot connected with Franklin's injured leg, cutting off his justification with a scream of pain. "No speeches, Edmund. No patriotic rhetoric. You murdered American soldiers for money and power. That makes you a traitor, and traitors have only one fate." Franklin looked up at Warren with the desperate hope of a man grasping for any possible salvation. "You can't kill me, Warren. I'm a serving officer. There will be investigations, congressional hearings, media attention. You'll never be able to explain." "No one's going to ask for explanations," Warren interrupted. "Because officially, you died in a training accident, along with everyone else involved in Sunset Protocol." Warren pulled out his sidearm and chambered a round with mechanical precision. "Your Pentagon sponsors will quietly retire. Your network will be reassigned to distant postings where they can't cause trouble. And your conspiracy will become another classified program that officially never existed." Franklin's eyes widened as he realized the scope of Warren's planning. "You can't cover up an operation this large. Too many people are involved, too much evidence. I learned from the best, Edmund. From you. 15 years of operations that officially never happened taught me exactly how to make inconvenient realities disappear." Warren's radio crackled with Bishop's voice. "Overwatch, this is Alpha 6. Building secured, intelligence recovered, all targets neutralized. What's your status?" "Primary target secured," Warren replied. "Beginning final phase." Franklin looked up at Warren with the desperate calculation of a man who'd spent his career manipulating others through fear and leverage. "Warren, if you kill me, you'll never know how deep this goes. The Pentagon sponsors the congressional authorization, the international connections. There are layers to this conspiracy you haven't even imagined." Warren considered this for a moment, then smiled with cold satisfaction. "Edmund, I recovered your computer files 20 minutes ago. I know about Senator Durham's committee, Defense Secretary O'Donnell's authorization, and the CIA liaison who's been coordinating with foreign intelligence services. I even know about the Swiss bank accounts and the planned expansion to target Navy SEALs." Franklin's face went ashen as he realized Warren had been several steps ahead throughout the entire operation. "You see, the difference between us is that I never underestimated my enemies," Warren continued. "But you made the mistake of treating me like just another target instead of the predator who trained most of the people trying to hunt him. Warren raised his weapon, his expression calm and professional. "This is for Jonathan," he said quietly. The shot echoed across the Virginia countryside, ending Colonel Franklin's conspiracy with the same precision Warren had used to eliminate threats across 3 continents. As sirens wailed in the distance, Bishop's team had contacted federal authorities to begin the evidence-handling process. Warren stood over Franklin's body and felt the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. His family was safe. The conspiracy was eliminated. Justice had been served with surgical precision. But more importantly, Warren had sent a message that would resonate through the Pentagon's corridors for years to come. American soldiers who served with honor would be protected, and anyone who threatened them would face consequences that official channels couldn't prevent or survive. Warren keyed his radio one final time. "All stations, this is Overwatch. Mission complete. Time to go home." As he walked away from Franklin's body toward the extraction point where Bishop's team waited, Warren thought about Jonathan sleeping safely in their house, guarded by Uncle Henry and protected by the knowledge that his father would never let anyone harm their family. The war for Warren Singh's family was over, and they had won completely.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.